Last week, Oklahoma and Iowa State played the first conference game of the 2018 season, and today, 4 conference matches and 2 non-cons highlight our Saturday. I'm Aaron Pryor, this is Big 12 Big Football, and let's get going head first into the Saturday slate. Iowa State plays the 11 a.m. against Akron this morning. Then we hit a loaded afternoon of games, including Kansas going for 3 in a row as they take on Baylor in Waco. K-State, coming off a win over UTSA, will travel to Morgantown. Texas will host TCU. Remember, last week, he said regardless of result, Coach Patterson didn't want the Frogs too high or too low after the Ohio State game. We'll find out how the Frogs respond, and Texas Tech will travel to Stillwater. Oklahoma will host Army. Let's lead off with that Oklahoma State-Texas Tech game. Both teams are coming off big-time home wins last week and clearly want to keep the momentum going into conference play. Starting with the home team and that ridiculously impressive defense. OSU leads the country in sacks. Jim Knowles' bunch racked up 7 sacks in last week's game against Boise State and held the Broncos to 1.1 yards per carry. Oklahoma State was 79th in the NCAA last year in total defense and is clearly making strides as they enter conference play this week.
The defensive line is very experienced. You're talking about a lot of seniors. That gives you confidence when you have players that have competed in a number of games.
Offensively, Oklahoma State is one of 2 teams in the country to rank in the top 20 in both passing and rushing offense. Also of note, Justice Hill is just 114 yards short of becoming the 9th member of the Oklahoma State 3,000 rushing yards club. Texas Tech comes into this game having only given up 1 sack on the year. And that kind of protection is a key reason for the emergence of quarterback Alan Bowman and wide receiver Antoine Wesley. I'm sure you've seen the stats, but they're 100% worth repeating. Bowman's 605 passing yards are the most by an FBS quarterback this year, and he's the 6th Red Raider quarterback to throw for 600 yards in Tech history. The leader of that bunch is Kansas City Chiefs signal caller Patrick Mahomes, who threw for 734 yards against Oklahoma in 2016, which is absolutely insane. Wesley caught 13 balls and 3 touchdowns. The junior has burst onto the scene in Lubbock and is currently 5th in the NCAA in receiving yards through 3 games. With all this in mind, I think this game comes down to whether the Red Raiders can hold the Cowboys' offensive attack down enough to be able to put up points. The OSU defense has proven that they're not to be taken lightly, so expect a heck of a game in Stillwater, 6 p.m. on FS1. We'll move backwards in the schedule now. Austin, Texas has got to be feeling good coming off a home win over USC. TCU is in town, and if both teams play like they did last weekend, we're in for a treat at 3:30 on Fox. Now, I know what you're thinking, but TCU lost, and that's true. The Frogs had a tough third quarter, and Ohio State took advantage of it last week. But look at the numbers. TCU racked up 511 yards of offense against a team that, coming into that game, was 17th in the country in total defense. Darius Anderson was a big part of that, rushing for 154 yards, including that second quarter 93-yarder. He and his fellow running backs is vital to the success of the purple and white. And the Frogs just might have the best combination of running backs in the Big 12.
Everybody gets to the ball games healthy, but Darius gives you a different angle, different kind of running back. Really was in the games, the big games we needed to win. He had big ball games, and so whether it's him or Shawo or Amani or Snow, whichever it is, we need to have guys that are going to step up because for us to be what we need to be, you have to have a running game. If you want to win championships, I mean, there hasn't been anybody that's won the league that hasn't been able to do that. So we definitely have to do it, and there's some good running backs in the league.
For the home team, the Horns' defensive front was mammoth in the win last week, holding USC to -5 rushing yards, as in 5 less than 0 yards. 5 less than 0 yards. A big part of that was UT's ability to get to the quarterback. The Horns had 3 sacks in the game for a loss of 26 yards. USC only tried to run the ball 16 times, and it didn't go well. The defensive line was a particular point of emphasis for Coach Herman coming into this season. When we talked to Big 12 Media Days back in July, he stressed how important it was to replace key pieces from a year ago.
It's really important. We've got some pieces to replace. Co-defensive player of the year in Malik Jefferson and the defensive lineman of the year in Puna Ford. But if we can get close to the production that we got from Puna, I feel like we've got a chance to be pretty good on defense again this year.
You feel like you have the guys to do that?
I do, yeah. And it might be mixing and matching. It might not be necessarily always from that nose guard position. It might be our 2 defensive ends and Breckenhager and Charles and Menahue, and some other guys that rotate in.
Morgantown, West Virginia is the site of the Mountaineers' first game in 2 weeks after last week's game was canceled due to Hurricane Florence's impact in the Carolinas. K-State comes into town, and it appears Coach Bill Snyder has landed on a quarterback. Skylar Thompson went 13 of 18 for 213 yards and 2 TDs through the air, and ran the ball 14 times for 66 yards and a score in the Wildcats' rout of UTSA. K-State is going to need Thompson to have a similar type of game, and it's imperative for the Cats to put together as many long, drawn-out drives as possible to keep the ball away from the WVU offense. Injuries have hit the KSU defense hard, as 3 starters will most likely be out on Saturday. When conference play starts, it's like a whole new season begins. You don't want to lose a non-conference game, but slipping up in conference play makes it that much more difficult to get to the Big 12 championship game come December 1st. But you don't have to tell Coach Dana Holgorsen that.
Anytime you play everybody every year, it makes it challenging. Top to bottom, great coaches in this league, great programs in this league, continuously getting better. But when you have to play them every year, it makes it very challenging. I was a part of the Big 12 when we had divisions, and I did this, so I know everybody in the other conferences are doing this right now. They look at their schedule and find out who they don't play, and try to hope for an easier path to being able to get to the championship game or the CFP. That doesn't happen in the Big 12.
Finally, we must talk about Kansas. The Jayhawks have won back-to-back games for the first time since 2011 after beating Central Michigan on the road and blowing out Big Ten opponent Rutgers on Saturday. The Jayhawks defense has been salty. So salty, in fact, they lead the country in turnover margin, defensive touchdowns, and lead the Big 12 in total defense through 3 games. Joe Dineen Jr. is the leader on that side of the ball and one of the best student athletes to play at Kansas in a long time. The senior leads the nation in solo tackles and has been a constant for Coach David Beatty since his arrival in Lawrence.
I don't even know where to start with Joe. Might be one of the best all-around guys and players I've ever coached in my career, which fortunately I've coached for a long time and we know a bunch. This guy, his leadership, his demeanor, the things that he brings to our ball club when it comes to the intangibles, his understanding, and then his toughness and meanness, and his refusal to let things stop him is something that you look for in players.
Kansas will have a chance for a 3rd win in a row. They head down to Waco to take on Baylor at 2:30 p.m. Central Time. Now we're wrapping things up here. Let's get to the top plays from last weekend. Number 3, Oklahoma State Boise. This was actually the Pokes' 2nd blocked punt of the game. Jarek Bernard gets around the outside. Zacharias Green with the scoop and score. Pistols firing. Oklahoma State is 3-0 on the year. Number 2, Ice Cream Man, I'll have 2 scoops. Caden Stearns blows through the USC line to block the field goal. Anthony Wheeler scoops it up and returns it to the house for the Texas touchdown. And number 1, Iowa State, Oklahoma. Look at Hakeem Butler breaking not 1, not 2, but 3 tackles on the way to the end zone. He had another fantastic score later in the game as well. Butler is a game-changing receiver, and we'll see what he can do for the Cyclones this morning against Akron. That's it for Big 12 Big Football this week. We'll see you next Saturday. For the Big 12 Conference, I'm Aaron Pryor.